Okay, well, time for episode 36. With you as always, me, Chucky, from the forums, and we've got G Money Jigsaw.
That is what they call me.
G Money. Yeah.
Actually, some people do call me that at work, unfortunately, but
Do they?
it happens.
Really?
Yes.
What a coincidence. I thought I was the only one that did that. Okay, well, another lineup of movies to discuss. On the list for today is one of the weirdest sequels that I think I've ever seen, Sorority House Massacre 2 from 1990. After that, we've got The House of the Devil from 2009, a bit of a satanic cult type flick. Then we move on to another sequel, Stepfather 2 from 1989, Daddy is Back. And then we've got Savage Streets from 1984. We get to see Linda Blair's tits. And then we finish off with a remake of a classic zombie movie, Dawn of the Dead.
So, as Tracky said, we are starting off tonight with Sorority House Massacre 2 from 1990. Plot is pretty simple. 5 women, Suzanne, Kim, Linda, Jessica, and Janie, buy this house where 5 years previous a murder took place, and well, they're not having a good night because something seems to be happening again, and they're getting killed off one by one, and oh my god, is it the creepy neighbor? We don't know. Well, we actually do know, but as Chucky said, this is a very interesting sequel. The primary reason being that it sort of flashes back to it flashes back to the murders that took place years previous, but those scenes aren't from the first Sorority House Massacre. They're from the Slumber Party Massacre, just not the same series. And it's not quite, at least I don't know why that happened. I'm not sure why they did that.
They either forgot which movie they were trying to make a sequel to, or that was intentional.
I mean, either way, it's just bizarre to me, but I mean, as soon as I saw that flashback, I'm like, hey, that's not Sorority House Massacre. And they also changed the name. The Killing Slumber Party Massacre has a different name than the name they gave him in this one. So it's just a very unique approach, shall we say. And this movie is, well, it's fun. I think it's fun. It's a bit goofy, but it's never like too overbearingly like comedic. It's just there's a scene in which the surviving girls are trying to escape and they run outside and they see some guy walking toward them. Now they either could have run through the rain, they had plenty of room, the guy coming toward them is a sort of big guy, he's probably not going to move that quickly, but no, they just ran back into the house. It's some great decision making, and you also get a plethora of either nude and or mostly nude women throughout the movie.
Fuck yeah.
I know, it's impressive. I think at least 2 of these actresses, of the main 5 actresses, I think 2 of them were previously in adult movies, based on what I saw from IMDb. So it makes sense why they were casted.
I kind of noticed that, because I noticed one was in movies, like one called The Hills Have Thighs, and another one I saw that popped up somewhat related to this, The House on Hooter Hill.
Yeah, those sound like some true classics that we'll try to get to you, guys, whenever we can.
Actually, I'm pretty sure they're directed by the same guy that directed this.
I wouldn't be surprised. So, I mean, if the basic slasher plot doesn't sound that intriguing to you, you do have plenty of beautiful women here, and most of them I think are pretty good looking. I have, of course, my own preferences that are entirely different from Chucky's, I can imagine, but it is impressive the amount of scantily clad women they have.
Yeah, well, when this movie was nominated, and I had to quickly look it up just to make sure I was able to find it easily enough to watch. And the very first image that popped up from it was one of the chicks just with huge tits hanging out. I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch this. This is on the list. I've like I said, this is just such a weird movie because it's like a sequel to a different movie even though the title of this one is a sequel to a separate movie, like two different movie series going on in one movie. I have to think that the reasoning is, well, let's try to capitalize on combining both fan bases, whatever fan bases there are for these movies. They can't be huge, but
Yeah, I have to say the somewhat amusing thing is, because this movie came out in 1990, there was already a Slamby Party Massacre in 87, and in fact by 1990 they had made Slamby Party Massacre 3. Now I'm not sure if that came out before or after Sorority House Massacre 2, but either way, it's interesting choice.
yeah. Look, I mean, the first Sorority House Massacre, I moderately enjoyed that one. I thought it was actually a decent slasher movie, and clearly this one has nothing to do with it other than the fact that it's some sorority-themed movie. And so it does seem like, even though it's got this title, it's more of a slumber party movie. I definitely liked the tits. And let's say that's still probably the best part of the movie to me. If I'm going to rewatch it, that's the main thing I'm rewatching it for. I mean, there's like a 2-3 minute span where all 5 girls in the house find a way to get their tits out. Which... those types of moments don't come by very often in most movies, so... bravo. Now... I think the rest of the movie's pretty corny.
Yeah.
Especially the end. Especially the end. I do like... it's such a small thing. They had a reference to Strip to Kill where they're talking about making a Strip to Kill Part 7.
Yeah, that was just bizarre, I'm not sure.
I think it's all to do because, you know, Roger Corman, he's got his hands involved with all of those movies. Like with Strip to Kill, with Slumber Party Massacre, with Sorority House Massacre. That's why they're kind of all connected, I guess, in some way. It's a pretty mediocre movie to me. Yeah, it has its fun moments, I guess, but for the majority of it, it's just girls running from room to room, and I wouldn't say any of the kills in the movie are all that great. Like, the first couple that I recall in the movie, it's just a guy raising up a hook, and then you see some blood splatter on the wall or the roof or whatever. I mean, probably the only moment in terms of gruesomeness is maybe when they see some of the bodies hanging up, but yeah, the horror aspect of it still didn't do too much for me. And like I said, some of it's corny, there's some possession going on, which didn't really do much for me. It was okay, but still, like I said, best part for me was the tits, and that's about all I have to say.
Yeah, it's really, in the last, I think, 15 minutes or so, when they started bringing up that possession thing, which is, I guess you could argue is foreshadowed because they used a Ouija board early in the movie, but as soon as they went that route, I have to admit I was somewhat disappointed, mainly because I was okay with the choice of the killer, but if they had given that killer, if they had given the individual a reason, as opposed to just having the individual be possessed by the other killer, I think it would have been quite a bit better. I'm not sad this is our relative, because even if they had gone that way, it's not like the movie would have been like a 9 out of 10 or anything. I guess for me, one of the standout, well, it's actually two standout, not necessarily moments, but the guy who lives across the street, or right next to them, that guy appeared in like maybe 4 or 5 scenes, and he cracked me up every single time. He has such a ponderous way of speaking and moving. Like he's trying to save these girls, but like he can't actually say, "Hey guys, I'm just here to help." He just walks toward them suddenly. Like, it's a great guy right there. And especially toward the end, when like a few things happen to him throughout the movie, and he's still kicking by the end of it. He gets shot with a shotgun, like, was it 5, 6, 7 times, and he survives. So the guy's impressive.
Yeah.
And also, there's a scene in which these 2 pointless police detectives go to a strip club, and I have to imagine the only reason they threw that in is simply because, hey, it's another excuse to show a little more nudity. which is fine. I'm not complaining about that. But they did have the strip club audience is pretty funny. There's two, I think, Middle Eastern men who were just saying like, "Oh yeah, take it off, baby," and all this really cheesy,
Yeah.
corny stuff. And they appeared, I think, twice throughout that scene, and I really appreciated them. And I would watch a movie based around them if they make one.
You just gave them a good idea for a spin-off.
If this-
Maybe
if
they
it-
can. Maybe they can make an appearance in Strip to Kill Part 7.
That would give me a reason to watch it, because those two, that's like such clean-cut looking guys, and it is just good times. I mean, that whole scene was sort of strange, talking to one of the few survivors, but you don't really gain anything from that. So, I know it's the movie. The movie's somewhat laughable. It's a somewhat bad movie, but I have to admit that I had a fun time with it. Like I said, as soon as I saw the flashbacks from Slumber Party Massacre, it just cracked me up. So I would probably be inclined to give this one. And I know to many people this might sound somewhat ludicrous, but I am an interesting guy. I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10, which is pretty much my average rating. I don't think it's great, but there's so many ridiculously funny things in this movie, plus the pretty women throughout, that I can easily see myself watching this again sometime in the future. It's just too much fun not to.
Yeah. Look, this one's somewhere between a 5 and a 6 out of 10 for me. And the only reason I consider a 6 is just the power of the tits. But look, I think I have to give it a 5. Yeah, outside of that one aspect of the movie, I don't think there's anything here that would make me want to watch or bring me back to this movie again. Not to say that it's not worth a one-time watch, but outside of that, I just can't see myself really wanting to see this again, except for that one obvious reason. I mean, I'm like that guy. I don't know how familiar you are with the movie Step Brothers, the Will Ferrell movie.
Never seen it in my life.
Okay. But there's this one character in it, towards the end, he's having this conversation with Will Ferrell, going on about how much he wants to punch him in the face just because his face is driving him nuts. And he kind of leaves before the conversation's over because he gets distracted by some tits, and he's just like, "Oh, tits," and then he walks off. That's me. So, it's a pretty powerful way to get me to watch a movie again. So who knows? I might watch this again, but not necessarily because the movie itself is great.
Yeah, I think it would be hard pressed to find many people who actually think this movie is like A+ material. Though it does make me wonder what the third Sorority House Massacre is like.
As long as they got the same level of tete action, or if the movie is a little better, one of those two things, I will still definitely watch it.
Yeah, I think they use a few of the same actresses too. So
Woo!
now they're playing different characters, I recall, but yeah, so that would make it somewhat interesting.
They better, because I mean, most of them, if not all of them, ended up dead. So
Pretty much.
but then who knows? I mean, this movie, this series doesn't seem to know what it's doing with its sequels, so I wouldn't be surprised if they had dead characters come back to life. We'll move on to The House of the Devil from 2009, which is a film set in the early 80s about a struggling college student who takes on a strange babysitting job that coincides with a full lunar eclipse. But hey, she needs the money, and she's desperate, but soon she discovers a more sinister side to the whole situation. I don't want to go into too much more because it might spoil the movie. This is a movie that I kind of blind bought it on Blu-ray not long after it came out, and it's just one of those movies that I think it was available in a specific country and it was nowhere else, and a few people said something about it, and I went, okay, I'll just take a chance on it. Overall, I like this movie. it's one of those movies that tries to present itself as if it was actually filmed in the early 80s. Like, it's got this kind of like grainy type look to it, and obviously it tries to play some older type music along with it, even to its title cards and the way it presents itself overall. It does a really good job of actually making it look like, hey, this could be a movie that was made 30 years ago. And I guess the other side to it is that it's a very slow movie. It moves very slowly. Usually when a movie moves that slow, that tends to take me out of it. For some reason, this particular movie, the time seems to fly by for me. I don't know exactly why. It's not like anything major happens in the first, hour, 10 minutes maybe to the movie, except for one kill. Outside of one kill, there's not all that much that happens. She applies for a babysitting position, she goes, she speaks to this old couple. When I say it like that doesn't sound like anything all that exciting. But I don't know, it's partly the style, plus some of the characters, like Tom Noonan. There's something a little off about his character. There's obviously something off about his supposed wife in the movie. It's just these little details that seem to make the movie interesting. And then it goes to some crazy places towards the end.
Yeah, so I actually watched this one for the first time today, and I honestly didn't really know that much about it. I was familiar with Ty West, the director, who did movies such as The Roost from 2005 and Cabin Fever 2. So I was interested to see how this movie went. I've heard somewhat positive things about this. I really enjoy the aesthetic. Like you say, it looks like it would be perfect in the late 70s, early 80s type thing. They did really well with the camera work and everything to make it look authentically from that period. And they also have music throughout the movie, which is from the 80s stuff. So I really enjoy the aesthetic of it. And the story up to a point is, I think, decent. I do like the sort of mystery surrounding the whole babysitting job that she gets. But at the same time, it's like an hour and 10 minutes into the movie when we finally get something a little more concrete than just a few moments of violence. And while I thought plenty of the stuff that happened before was fine, this is a scene in which she's listening to headphones on cassette play, just dancing around the house to music. It's fun, but at the same time dragging out it's a slow burn movie, so dragging it out that long, like an hour 10 minutes, it's a interesting choice. The unfortunate thing is I wouldn't even care about that if I actually really liked the final 20 minutes, and I don't. I was pretty sure that's where the story was going, but once we got there, a lot of stuff along those types of lines, and I don't want to say too much, because you should really watch the movie for yourself if you haven't, but the way they sort of conclude the story, I just personally don't care for, and I never really have. Those types of horror movies aren't high on my list of enjoyment. So I wasn't really disappointed because I knew it was coming, but because of that, I didn't enjoy the movie quite as much as I was thinking I might when I was just halfway through.
A funny thing, when you mentioned how she was putting on the headphones, dancing around, well, earlier in the movie we see that, she eventually squeezes a lot of money out of this babysitting job. She manages to get $400. And as she's dancing around in the house, she accidentally knocks over some sort of antique or a vase or something like that and breaks it. And immediately I thought it'd be so funny if Tom Noonan came back and was like, that was worth $400. And then he just takes the $400 back. That would have made for an incredible moment in the movie. And then you cut to credits. But all jokes aside, look, I wasn't exactly sure where the movie was going, even though if you pay attention to the very first, it says a few things before the movie starts at the beginning, something about satanic cults. I can't remember exactly what it was. But obviously, if you remembered that part, you kind of know at some point it's going to go into that territory. But or at least when I first watched the movie, I either missed reading that, or I just never paid enough attention to it to connect that that's kind of what it's building up to. And, I mean, I always find cults somewhat creepy. To be honest, more the straight religion cult types, like, end of the line, that type of thing. I find that more creepier than this, but, it's still a bit different to everything that I usually see. In fact, I actually prefer the first hour to the movie to the last 20-30 minutes or whatever, however long it goes for. Not that I dislike the ending, I just feel like the movie's stronger points, like you said, the aesthetic. So the style of the movie is a big plus to me, plus some of the characters. Just Tom Noonan, I mean, he's an actor that I like, and he does a pretty good job at selling a guy who appears to be fairly nice, but, there's something a bit off about him. And his wife, she was somewhat creepy, I thought, like before anything goes down. Yeah, so all those things just help to make the time fly by, even though technically nothing was happening. Yeah, and to be honest, I didn't really have too much else to say, but I did notice your favorite go-to public domain movie was being watched on TV.
Yes.
So you must have appreciated that.
More than you know. And actually, it's somewhat disappointing because this is I can imagine this is a slightly higher budget movie, so it's not like they had to go that route if they didn't want to. So yeah, I just, again, I get that it's in public domain, just leave it alone.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much the budget was for this one.
Looks like it was about 900,000, which is an estimated budget, which, isn't nearly as high as, like, your typical Hollywood might have, but
I would consider that on the lower end.
if it's over like 100,000, you probably don't need to be showing Night of the Living Dead in your movie.
Okay. I'm sure that Shadow Zone movie, which used it, was well over 100,000.
That was a TV movie, so technically it's different. But I'm very picky about what I am okay with. I was going to ask, are you familiar with the movie? I think it's from 2008. Called Babysitter Wanted.
It sounds familiar. I think I might have watched it around the time it came out, but I don't recall it.
Because when I started watching this one, I was almost automatically reminded of that one, and it goes a different direction, though there are quite a few similarities between the two. And I have to say, the more I got into this movie, it was reminding me of some like the more, I guess, satanic side of these movies. This one being I don't know if it's necessarily obscure, but I don't hear that many people talking about it. A movie titled Warlock Moon from 1973. It's possibly the ending of that movie and House of the Devil, somewhat similar also. So I did think that was interesting, and whenever a movie like this can, almost beautifully emulate movies from like the 70s and 80s, it's always a really nice accomplishment. I guess my main issue with this one has to be that I just don't know if the build-up is entirely, let me rephrase, I just think the ending is entirely worth the build-up. If there's more of a oomph at the ending, I might be more okay with it. But like I said, I wasn't particularly shocked by anything we saw at the end. And especially like that final scene, just like that one line that the nurse says. It's like, oh, that's so shocking. I definitely didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
Even though I pretty much did from when she woke up. But it's just one of the things where if you know what's going to be happening, it still might be okay, but there wasn't enough, I guess, new powerful scenes in the last 20 minutes to really make it worth it. And I guess that's my main issue with this. I still think it's a well-made movie, and I think the main actress, I think it's Jocelyn Donahue, I think she did a really good job in her role. But I just don't think it's a great movie, which given everything they had to work with, I think it's just somewhat disappointing.
That one gunshot kill was pretty epic, though.
Yeah, that was. See, actually, and that's another thing. We never really learned much about the individual who did that. I mean, most of the information we learn is like from your favorite homeboy, what's his name? Noonan?
Tom Noonan. He's a bad guy in RoboCop 2, by the way. We need to watch that at some point.
Indeed, and actually, now you mention it, I did like his performance too. Very soft-spoken individual. I feel like if I was, the one getting into that babysitting job, I would have asked some more questions and before accepting. But I get it, she needs some money, so, by all means, take the job. But I just wish there was more power at the end of this, and it's still a movie worth seeing, but I definitely feel like they could have changed it around just a little, and it could have been a bit better.
That one scene where the blonde pulls over to have the cigarette in her car, and the guy pops up out of nowhere, which is pretty funny. She's like, "Where did you come from?" Like, he just comes out of nowhere. But there's one thing they say in their dialogue that just it always cracks me up when. So after he lights her cigarette, he's kind of just standing there at her door, and he says something like, "Geez, it's really freezing out here tonight." And she kind of looks at him, and she's just like, "Okay," like he's angling for her to invite him into the car, or her response is kind of like, "Where are you going with this?" I don't know. It's just such a simple thing, but it always cracks me up.
And actually, on a related note, I wish that that character had actually stayed with the main character. I mean, if you're getting $400, you can give like, 100 of that. She might not even need any of the money, but I wish she had more of a role in this movie than what she did, because I actually really liked her, and I found her somewhat more interesting than the main character herself, to be honest.
Yeah. There's a pepperoni pizza obsession in this movie too. There's like a scene earlier, and then she also has one later. So,
well, like he says, "Are you college kids like pizza?"
Yeah. Hey, pepperoni pizza's pretty good, but it doesn't need to be an entire character in a movie. Yeah. So, I enjoy this movie, and a big part of that is just its style, the way it's shot, the music. It just feels like a movie that is actually from, or at least for the most part, from the early 80s. And that's a big thing for me. Yes, it's a bit slow, but that time goes by pretty quick. The ending isn't great, but to me it's acceptable. I'm fine with it. I do wish the ending was a bit better, but it is what it is. So I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10, and I like to watch it, every few years. I have a decent enough time with it.
Yeah, so like I said throughout, I think the movie looks really nice. I really like what they're going for. The aesthetics, everything in it's wonderful, aside from aspects of the story. It was a mixture of like really solid for most of it, but then the ending was just somewhat of a letdown. So I'm just giving this one a 7 out of 10. So, which is again my average rating. So I didn't hate it, I didn't love it. It's an okay movie, and like I said, if you haven't seen it, you should probably watch it at some point. But I wouldn't go in anticipating being blown away, because you might just not be.
Actually, one thing that I was going to say, another thing, and I don't know if this does anything for you. The old couple in that movie, they had some candy on the table. It looks like that classic old person type candy. I guess you're not familiar with it, but like back when I was a kid, old people always had this type of candy sitting on like their coffee table or somewhere in their house, and I don't know, it's just another thing that kind of amuses me. Anyways, you can move on.
Okay. Well, speaking about stepfathers, next up is Stepfather 2.
We were literally not talking about stepfathers at all.
That's the beauty of segues. Stepfather 2 from 1989, which pretty much follows immediately from the first movie. Jerry Blake, the stepfather, is in an asylum and he's dreaming, about the events at the end of the first Stepfather movie. Him, going through the ringer as it was. So he's in this institution, he's able to get this one psychologist to trust him, and over the course of, I'm not sure if it's a few weeks or a month, he's able to manufacture a breakout. So he escapes from the institution, and doing what he does, he wants to try to find another wife and another perfect family. So he goes down to California and under the guise of being a family therapist, and meets the perfect woman, and then things go from there. So this movie's decent. It's now, if you guys remember, I gave the first Stepfather a very glowing review because I've always loved the movie, and this movie's nowhere near as good, but it's still a pretty decent movie, mainly because you have Terry O'Quinn, doing his stepfather role, which I think he does such a great job. I mean, there's a few scenes in this I want to talk about in particular. But before I talk about how this movie is better than some of you might think it is, what were your thoughts on this one, Chucky?
Well, I can't remember the exact rating I gave the first one. It was either a 6 or a 7. I think it might have been a 6. And I enjoyed this more or less on the same level as the first one, to be honest. I mean, if I had to pick one over the other, I guess the first one, I would say, is maybe a little better than this one, but I'm not a huge fan of the series so far, so I mean, my opinion might not mean as much to others who do enjoy this series. I guess the first thing is, I mean, right at the start we see the title, Stepfather 2, Make Room for Daddy. Sounds like a bad porno, to be honest. At least these days it does. Maybe at the time they didn't anticipate how the word daddy would be used 10, 20, 30 years later, but there you are. It to be honest, it's just more of the same to me. I mean, it's, yes, different characters, slightly different events, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing. He's, trying to get a new family, and things happen, and yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I find these movies so engaging is just the very traditional character that the stepfather is, trying to be. He talks about in this movie the importance of tradition. He doesn't even want to sleep with his fiance before they get married.
That cracked me up, actually. The part where he's like, I even had sex with you. I'm like, dude, that was like probably the best part of the process, and he's acting like it's the worst part.
Hey, that's not what he's in. He just wants the family. He doesn't need the physical intimacy. But I think he is such an interesting character, and this movie shines a little light on that. He mentions in conversations with the woman's kid, a little bit about his father, and I always found it just intriguing whatever life this guy had to become this way. There's also another scene which I think is pretty, not necessarily funny, but it just goes to show the type of guy he is, when he's having some sort of Rice Krispies knockoff, and he just puts his ear to the cereal so he can listen to the crackling pop, just like something that most kids would do, and he just takes the joy in the innocent little things, and hey, you can't blame him for that.
And like most kids, he was accruing a nice collection of pubes there in the mental facility. I don't know what the hell he was doing there.
Well, I think that was for his fake mustache.
Oh, yeah, okay, I didn't really put that together, but Okay. Actually, let's talk about this whole disguise and epic manhunt by the police force. Because, look, when he escapes, I mean, it seemed like a pretty simple escape after he just killed the doctor and that one guard, and that seemed to be it. But after he leaves, we hear on the news how it's like one of the biggest manhunts for this guy. And they show the news at least twice in this movie. Like once before he gets to this new neighborhood that he goes to. And also, the lady that he ends up marrying is literally watching the news. Why don't they show a picture of this guy in the news? It's not like he disguises himself at all throughout the movie, aside from wearing a mustache in one scene. So he goes out, buys groceries. He doesn't live all that much of a secretive life in terms of people seeing who he is. I mean, doesn't that sound ridiculous that he just walks around like a normal person and no one seems to notice? No one sees him on the news outside of maybe one small crappy picture in a newspaper that no one looked at?
Yeah, I feel like if I was in his situation, I probably would have gone maybe more closer to the East Coast and stay on the West Coast, but that's just me.
I mean, I'm not someone who really gets hung up on details like this, because if you're watching a horror movie, like a slasher movie, you kind of just suspend your disbelief in a lot of the things, but this movie plays itself somewhat more serious, and something like that just doesn't make any sense. Like, he would be caught within one day if he's not disguising his actual look, which he doesn't do.
I don't really have anything to refute that. You just have to track it up to horrible authorities and pretty terrible manhunt. I'm assuming they would have, because I believe the institution was in Oregon and he went down to California, so I'm assuming the Oregon police told the California police, hey, you better look out for this guy, but it's possible.
I mean, it's on the national news, I'm guessing, so, you think they'd have a picture up and everyone, at least some people in the neighborhood, out of all these different women who are doing these classes with him because he's acting as some sort of doctor, at least one of them would have seen him on the news, had the news shown a goddamn picture of his face.
Well, maybe the media... Well, I've got nothing. I would just say that Terry O'Quinn's character is very lucky in that both the media and the authorities are both pretty atrocious.
I'll just say one more point while I'm on this. It doesn't really affect my enjoyment of the movie. I'm not saying that it does. I'm just saying it's one of those things that's just so ridiculous. So, there you go. And
I actually, somewhat related, so one of the women who is in his assassins, she's also a male woman, so she finds out, or tries to find out a little more about this guy, because she's friends with the woman that he's going to marry. So, this is a somewhat funny scene in which she confronts him saying, hey, here's a picture of you from your yearbook basketball team. It's like, well, and I don't see you here. Well, a man can change a lot in 15, 20 years. It's like, oh yeah, they can't change this much. And the whole basketball team's a bunch of black guys. Which, it's funny because you can tell from Terry O'Quinn's expression, it's like, oh god, well, have to just kill this woman now. And, like, that scene's not even necessarily played for laughs. It's more like a dramatic type thing, but it seems like that, I don't know, just bring a little more enjoyment to me.
All he had to do at that moment, when she shows the picture, all he had to do is say, Black Lives Matter. And then, what's she gonna say? Anything she says as a rebuttal to that is totally gonna get shot down by everyone.
Well, unfortunately, this movie might predate that movement by like 25 years. Right?
I mean, it's worth a shot.
And I want to point out, I guess, two more quick things. One, and I actually didn't notice this when I first watched the movie, and I've seen this one twice, but I didn't notice this when I watched it last. But that the kid is the kid of the woman's played by Jonathan Brandis, who might not be a name people recognize, but he's also the same kid who played Bill Dunbar from the 1990 It miniseries.
Yeah, well, my wife had like a major crush on him when she was much younger, so she came out while I was halfway through this movie, and as she sat down, I was like, try not to have an orgasm. She's like, what are you on about? And then he pops on and she's like, oh.
Well, he is a decently good-looking boy, I guess. So I did find that somewhat interesting, though. And one other thing, I find it somewhat amusing that the whole reason that this doesn't work out, aside from the fact that the authorities never catch on to him, is the fact that this stepfather's overconfidence, one with the wine and two with the whistling, just completely ruins everything for him. Like, if he had just not brought that wine home, he might have been okay.
Another thing in this movie that just, I don't know, is just something worth mentioning, is just the woman that he marries. There's something about her that, I don't know, maybe it's the blue eyes, something just really weird about her, but all I could keep thinking throughout the movie is how much she looked kind of like she's like a budget ass Kirstie Alley. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but I don't know, look quite similar. So I don't know. It's just one of those things that just kept bugging me throughout the movie. I'm looking at her. I keep thinking of who she looks like, and while we're on the topic of her, just going back to that sex scene. That sex scene could have been a little hotter, don't you think?
Okay, it could have been, but these movies were never about that type of thing, unfortunately.
Well, look, that might have helped bump up the rating a little bit.
See, if you want your sleazy movies, there's also Sorority House Massacre movies out there. The Stepfathers are high class.
I think this movie's a little bit better than Sorority House Massacre 2, which we just discussed earlier, but there's never any reason to not have a hotter sex scene in the movie.
Yeah, I probably don't have any reply to that.
I mean, come on. Make room for daddy. Come on. You gotta have some more. Come on.
Yeah, there's actually one small thing I wanted to point out, and I think I should be done. And I meant to mention this earlier. The woman who played the character who found out about his lying about his past was the same main character from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, the Stretch DJ woman.
I was trying to think of where I saw her before.
Yeah, and it took me a little to see that because I knew she looked familiar. I just couldn't place it, and then it hit me and it's like, oh hey, it's the same woman. So I definitely thought that was interesting because she is always a fun character. I mean, I think aside from that, though, this movie, I think it's decent. It almost has sort of like a TV movie feel to it, which I think the third movie actually is a TV movie, but this one wasn't. So I think this movie's decent. I don't think it's nearly as good as the first movie, but if you like the first movie, it's still worth watching. I would probably give this a bit above average if I'm being a bit generous. So like maybe a 7.5 out of 10, but I'd probably give it like a 7 out of 10. It's a decent movie, it's just not great. And I think the only reason why I like it as much as I do is because I think the character that Terry O'Quinn plays as Stepfather is such an interesting character. And unfortunately, that's not going to save the third movie when we get to it.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I thought this movie was okay. And like I said at the beginning, it's kind of more of the same of the first movie. And I understand if people enjoy the first movie significantly more than this one, but for me, wasn't a huge fan of the first one. So this one, it's more or less the same in terms of enjoyment. So 6 out of 10 is what I give it. It's okay. I didn't mind watching it. I did enjoy seeing how he would escape from the mental facility that he's at. Just because you could tell he was kind of buttering up that psychologist guy, and just seeing exactly where he's going to go. I had a feeling it'd have something to do with whatever he was making, because they just kept going back to that scene a couple of times, and I was thinking, there's a reason why they're going back to showing him making this thing, this house thing. So, and then, just as he smashes it, and he's still trying to act like it's just weird. It was interesting just to see how he put that all together. I can't see someone doing that in real life, but, hey, it's a movie, so whatever. Moving on to Savage Streets from 1984. This one is about a teenage vigilante seeking revenge on a group of violent thugs who raped her handicapped sister and killed one of her best friends. That's in a nutshell what it's about. It's a very 80s movie when you watch it. They got like the 80s rock and the hairdos, and just, it's just one of those movies that you just look at it and you think 80s. It's got Linda Blair in it. I don't know if this is... It has to be one of her most popular movies outside of The Exorcist. It starts off showing her nipples in a dress, so... I have a fondness for tits. And she does get them out in this movie. So, there you go. I promise I won't talk about tits anymore. So, let's move on. One thing about this movie, I'll just say overall, I do enjoy the movie. And I think this is the second time I've watched it. And it's just more... Like I said, it's very 80s. I wouldn't say there's a whole lot to it. Something happens, and then retaliation happens back and forth. There's a lot of catfighting in the movie, which is fantastic. It's got a lot of corny dialogue. John Vernon plays the most badass principal of all time in this movie. Oh man, I loved his character, and it doesn't show up too much in the movie, just 2 or 3 times, but they're all epic scenes. Just the way he talks to his students is just commendable. or even if they're not students, they're just on the school grounds. I mean, who can't like an insult like "go fuck an iceberg"? You never expect a principal to say that sort of thing. The way he talks to Linda Blair's character is just... That's the type of thing people would be outraged about these days. It's just hilarious. Look, I'll let you speak a little bit as to what you thought of this movie before I go into...
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so surprised no one. I've not seen this one before. I've honestly never heard of this one before. And it's just a somewhat depressing 80s movie. I had no idea high schools back in the 80s were this wild, so I feel like I missed out on something, but that's okay.
Well, they must have been... Sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if you've seen Class of 1984. It's got some similar gang, thug, high school type related issues, so...
Yeah, so I suspect the thing is, since when I was in high school, I lived in a town of about 20,000 people. So I can imagine it's a lot more, shall we say, lively in a city like LA. And any major city, I can imagine it's a much more rowdy experience than small town, Midwest high schools. So I mean, I found it interesting and again depressing. The fact that there's a student here who gets she gets raped. I was going to say sexually assault, but that's beyond sexual assault. And pretty much, as far as we can tell, and it's not uncommon. Pretty much nothing's being done. Like, some of the teachers try to reach out to Linda Blair's character, but they do a very good success, and who can blame Linda Blair's reaction? I mean, and the principal just suspends her for getting into a fight that she was justified in getting into. So it's a really downbeat. I mean, it's an 80s movie. It's in a way, it's sort of a fun movie because it has a lot of the 80s vibe. But I mean, it's just really, it's not a very happy movie. I mean, you have a character who gets raped, and not only any character who gets raped is a bad thing, but this character is both deaf and mute, so she can't even, that's the thing. When the character starts, she can't even scream out. Um, I mean, type of people who would do that to a woman like that's just horrendous anyway. But you also have one of the characters who just pisses this one guy off, so they throw her off of a overpass, because that's how they do things in the city apparently. And I have to admit, even the ending wasn't quite as satisfying as I was hoping, but I'll probably save that quote-unquote critique for a little later.
Well, actually, now that you brought up the whole deaf-mute thing, it reminded me of another movie that is technically, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it is another vigilante movie from the 80s called Miss 45, and she's not deaf, but she is a mute, and she has the worst luck. She gets raped on her way home from work, and after that one, she gets home and there's like a thief in her apartment, like a totally different person, and he also tries to rape her. So talk about bad luck, especially being mute, that you can't, scream out or really do anything. But anyways, who knows? We may see that at some point. And by the way, this might be the most ideal role for Linnea Quigley, where she doesn't have to talk. So, I mean, I to be honest, I don't get the appeal of her. Like, she has this huge following. I've never found her. I mean, in terms of her acting, she's never been a great actor to me. I mean, look, I can watch movies with her in them, but I don't watch movies for her. So, I don't know. Let's not say I can't like movies that she's in, or even movies that she has a lead role in, but yeah, I don't get the appeal. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the revenge aspect of it towards the end, those scenes could have been somewhat better. It just feels like she disposes of them pretty quickly outside of the main guy, but even then, a little, I don't know, I was just expecting a little bit more in that area, but overall, I'm happy with the movie. I was always engaged in the movie. I don't know, maybe have Fred Savage in the movie. That would have made it even funnier, having him in, because the movie's called Savage Streets. Just have him play like some little kid drug dealer on the corner or something. I don't know. I mean, there's not a whole lot for me to say about it. I mean, the punks, you kind of want them to get their ass kicked, and they do get their ass kicked, and it's got corny dialogue, but it's all fun enough for an 80s movie if you leave the whole rape thing aspect out of it. To be honest, it's not exactly like the most graphic rape scene or anything. It's nothing like you compare to watching 30 minutes of rape in I Spit on Your Grave. They just show a few quick moments of it in this movie. It's nothing all that outrageous in terms of those types of movies. And there's some surprising things that happen in the movie, like the scene where he throws the one woman over the overpass. So it was just, when he's holding her in the air, you're like, is he gonna like? And then he just decides, yeah, I'm gonna do it. He just throws her. I don't know. It's fucked up, but
Yeah. So I do what you mentioned. Well, probably one of my standout scenes. And you mentioned this a bit earlier, but the fight between Cindy and Branda in the locker room, which I thought was hilarious, mainly because I was actually I guess surprised might not be the right word, but the language used was a bit stronger than what I would have expected. And like the fight they get into lasts lasts a bit of time. It goes into even the shower portion of the locker room, and I especially like that scene.
There's some things in this movie, like let's just get these two chicks having a cat fight, get them all wet. Like it's just so ridiculous, but at the same time, I'm so appreciative of these moments.
You have to love that one woman's point. Like, she's pissed off because her boyfriend is paying more attention to this other chick, and she's blaming this other chick instead of her boyfriend. That's That's a quality logic right there.
So it's also funny how she keeps on going, instead of like blaming the boyfriend, she keeps on acting as if like Linda Blair's character is the one doing it all. I mean, she even interrupts one conversation where she's literally telling the guy to like fuck off. And she's still like, stop talking to my man, you know. It's just ridiculous. Oh, by the way, and in that scene, I think they had a fight in that scene. Or actually, it might have been a separate scene, but they have a fight and she rips her top off in class. I'm like, what in these moments happened while I was at high school? I mean, these are the moments that I would have loved to see.
Yeah, and actually, now you mention it, I felt really bad for that teacher. I believe it was a biology course. That teacher had literally no control over anything that was going on in that classroom. Like, he could, like, I remember he was trying to break up the fight, but, you know, one of the taller kids was just, like, sort of pushing him back, and the guy couldn't do anything.
It was the actual boyfriend.
Yeah.
It was the boyfriend. It was like, I want to see my girlfriend and this chick that I like go at it, and Boyfriend of the Year award goes to that guy.
I mean, I've never found Linda Blair the most attractive of actresses from that time period, but she's so decently attractive. So, I mean, and obviously in this movie, who doesn't want to see her kick the ass of that really annoying chick? I mean, it just, in a movie like this, you can pretty much expect that, which reminds me of like the club scene later on, in which these guys are just harassing one of the women. I always laugh at, by the way, when people are harassing a woman and the woman fights back and the guys get all angry with her. Like, what, you expect her to just take it? Like, you know, defending yourself isn't like an insult to you, just accept it. So it just, this so much of this I guess this wild behavior that I would imagine is probably a little more. I mean, nowadays I'm hopefully, but none of this stuff would be accepted. But I can imagine back in the 70s and 80s in bigger cities, it wasn't really even uncommon. Even that scene at the beginning where the punks find that one guy who owes them money and they sort of assault the girlfriend for a bit. I mean, talk about some really dickish guys.
Though we did get some good action there. It's one of these movies that kind of toes between a 7 and an 8 for me. And I'm going to... I mean, there's just a lot of good scenes in here. Even though the movie as a whole, it has some issues. But I'll give it an 8 out of 10, if only just for the fact that John Vernon's principal character threw it over the top for me. So, 8 out of 10, all up in this bitch.
Yeah, so I think my main issue with this one, I find it quite depressing most of the time. Auburn City life, the fact that half these characters just want to get out of there and go someplace bad, and who can blame them if this is what they have to put up with? And also, who can blame the people who live in a society for acting out in the way they do? It just, the whole system is problematic there. So it's a really depressing movie, and most movies that deal with rape would probably be depressing. And then the ending isn't quite as satisfying as I would hope. I mean, she does get the revenge, I guess, but it doesn't have that same impact that I would hope it would. I mean, it's a well-made movie. It's quite a few enjoyable scenes in here. I can't really imagine going back to this one all that often, but I think I'll probably give this one a 7 out of 10.
Actually, one thing I thought of, in the movie, there's a scene where the principal suspends Linda Blair's character from high school. And it reminded me of, like, do any kids actually care that they get suspended outside of the fact that their parents might be upset with them? I mean, it's literally a free holiday from school. In fact, the ultimate insult to me was the fact that I once got into a fight at school with this one guy. He was just constantly being a dick to me. So one day I just had enough of it. It was this guy who played football, and I'm actually just as big of a guy, but I wasn't really the type to play football. Anyways, he was always being a dick, and eventually I had enough, and then we started beating up each other. And we both got sent to the principal's office, but we had like a fill-in principal or something at that time. Like the one that we had either quit or was away for some reason, and so we had kind of like an acting principal. In any case, it seemed like when he was talking to us, he didn't quite have full power. So he said you're both suspended, but you still come to school. I'm like, what the fuck is this? I don't get the free holiday, but you say I get suspended? This makes absolutely no fucking sense. So that outside of him saying you're suspended, there was no suspension. It made no sense. And funnily enough, both me and the other guy who were fighting, we just both left the office laughing about it. So, I don't know. It was just a stupid situation.
Yeah, I don't believe I've ever gotten suspended, so unfortunately I cannot relate.
You're a straight A student who would never be out of line like that.
It was A's and B's, but I'll take it.
Yeah.
I did get a C in one of my math classes, so that was different. I know. I always hated math though, so it's okay. Next up is Dawn of the Dead from 2004. So this is a remake to the famous Romero 78 Dawn of the Dead. This one came out 2004, directed by Zack Snyder. Probably one of the best zombie movies in the last 20 years. And it pretty much follows a nurse and a group, there's a police guy, salesman. They are trying to take shelter in a mall after a zombie outbreak happens. And they, have some contentions with some mall security people, but they eventually get together, work this out, and then basically try to survive in a world when zombies are banging at the doors and people are being eaten alive. Honestly, it's pretty much the same as any other zombie movie. I know this might sound a bit hypocritical, coming from a guy who's a big slasher fan, but I find zombie movies some of the most repetitive horror movies out there. Because pretty much
it is pretty funny for a slasher fan to say that. I'm a slasher fan too, so.
But it's just like every zombie movie, group of guys and it's fights between the group, and it just I mean, and some of them come out really well like this one, but even so, it's not like it's stylish as far as the plot goes. But this movie did have one had a really strong cast. I'm not familiar with most of the cast members, to be honest. Even the black guy, he's a big name, but I don't really recognize him. So it has a great cast. It has some pretty good special effects, really nice cinematography, especially the opening scene in the suburban area being overrun by zombies. That scene was just fantastic.
Yeah, that was good.
So the movie, I watched an hour and 50-minute version. I think the hour and 40-minute version is like the theatrical version, but the movie's a bit longer, but I think it is pretty much able to keep me entertained throughout. There's not really any like really slow moments. Like most of the characters, even the characters that I don't particularly like, most of the characters are interesting, such as Steve, who has this rich pompous dick, but he cracked me up with everything he said. And even some characters that you might not expect you would enjoy, you end up sort of liking, like CJ, who was one of the mall security guys, and he actually becomes almost an okay character. And I have a few issues with this one, which I'll get into, but before that, what are your thoughts on this one? What's your history with this?
Yeah, I first saw this one in the theaters, so I mean, I enjoy this movie. Same like you, I'm not a huge fan of zombie movies. Not to say that there aren't a couple that come around that I actually do enjoy, and this is one of them. I don't think it's my favorite zombie movie. That probably still goes to Shaun of the Dead, but it's up there for me. A couple of things you touched on. I think there's a number of characters in here that you actually root for. Like, there's a lot of movies I watch in zombie movies, and you kind of like, whatever happens to the characters. And this one, you actually do, like, at least for me, I tended to care that specific people actually made it. I mean, Ving Rhames, the big black guy, he was quite badass in the movie. You know, I wanted him to make it. CJ, he turns into a likable character. He's quite a dick at the start, and he's an asshole, and you're not quite sure what to make of him. And then eventually, I think he wins you over as the movie goes along, because he actually starts jumping on board with what they're trying to do, and he becomes a very helpful character. And that's a big part of it. I think that really helps over a lot of other zombie movies, that the non-zombie characters, there's something to enjoy and be entertained by with them. There's a lot of little things as well in the movie. Like, in terms of songs and music in the movie, look, one funny thing is, and I don't think I ever picked this up originally, but I definitely did this last time I watched it. And I did watch the longer version, because that's the one I've got on Blu-ray. As they enter the mall, or the earlier stages of being in the mall, you can hear like the music in the mall playing in the background. And it's kind of amusing. Now, I don't know if this was set up to happen this way, but there's one scene, I forget the actor's name, the other black guy in the movie, the one who's got the pregnant wife, or girlfriend or wife, I can't remember.
I think it's Mekhi Phifer.
Yeah, that's it. There's a scene where he's alone, just, checking out some area of the mall, and over the radio they've got like a little mall tune version of the song All By Myself playing in the background. You know that song that's like, all by myself.
I forget who did it, but I do know the song.
Eric Carmen is the guy who did the original version. That was amusing, because obviously he's all by himself in that particular scene. And then there's another scene, I think it's when they first get in the mall, after they've just, they've managed to get into the mall after being chased by zombies from outside, and they've got a tune, that "Don't Worry, Be Happy" song in the background. I don't know, it feels like that was set up. Maybe it's a coincidence, because there was one other song later on played that didn't seem to have any kind of relevance to the situation. But anyways, and another thing with music is, look, at the end of the movie, they play the Disturbed song, Down With The Sickness. A lot of people know it, very popular song. But earlier in the movie, they have a lounge version of that song done by this guy called Richard Cheese. And if you've ever looked him up, he does like lounge music versions of other popular songs, some heavy metal songs. And it's just so amusing and likable, and I don't know, it fit in well with the movie, so that was amusing to see as well.
Yeah, it's fun because I'm not a big Disturbed guy. When the lounge version popped up, I thought I recognized it, but I couldn't place the song. And then once we get to the end, when they actually play the original Disturbed song, like, oh hey, that's what it was. That's an interesting musical style choice there. Actually, speaking of songs, I don't know why I didn't mention this before, but when the Johnny Cash song, "The Man Comes Around," is playing during the sequence showing them reacting to the zombie thing going on in the world, that's a really enjoyable sequence for me. One, because it's not my favorite Johnny Cash song, but it's a pretty good Johnny Cash song. And just seeing all of that chaos, going out throughout all these different countries, and it really makes you question how many people are going to be, around in, like, let's say 5 years after this.
And if you think about it, like, while everyone's been, well, a lot of people have been at home due to coronavirus and everything, and everyone's acting like it's the biggest, worst thing that can happen in the world. I mean, just to put things in perspective, just consider this situation. I think the big zombie outbreaks probably a lot worse.
Yeah, just maybe. It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're gonna be sitting in a lot more isolation if that happens. Anyways, another thing about the movie, like something that's just kind of memorable to me, and it's just that line when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth, and the way Ken Foree delivers it on the TV in this movie. I don't know, for some reason that sticks with me too. I really like the line. Obviously, that's borrowed from the original movie, but yeah, it's just one of those all-time lines. It's just really, really good. Really good to hear and see. Just the only other thing that I kind of wanted to mention is that it doesn't happen very often, but and this isn't the only time it's happened, but this is one movie where, it's proof that a remake and original can both exist and both be considered good, because this movie has like I think a 7.3 on IMDb, which is really high for a horror movie, especially a remake of like a more modern remake of a classic horror movie that and it's not like it would be different if people didn't really care for the original, but obviously it's one of the most popular zombie movies out there, and the remake comes along and it seems like most people dig it.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, I saw this 2004 version of Dawn of the Dead long before I saw the original. And I think when I first saw it, I gave it like really high ratings, and I still think it's a really good movie. But after I saw the original one, I realized, the original is probably still about the movie. At least I see this clearly about the movie. But this is a very well done remake. And it uses, some of the elements, but it changes quite a lot of it to make it more fresh. And it's a very action-oriented ramp zombie type movie, and it's pretty much enjoyable from start to finish. My only real complaint, and this is, I never cared much for like a zombie pregnancy type thing. So that scene, I'm sure it may have shocked some people who saw it, but that scene never did much for me, because Mekhi Phifer's character he's a decent guy at first, but then he just slowly becomes degraded by everything going on with his wife, which makes sense. But that little plot point, I just didn't care much for.
Well, here's an amusing thing for you. When my wife and I went to see this movie, she was roughly, I think, probably around 6 to 7 months pregnant. So, great timing and all. It's not like I went to this movie expecting to see that type of scene, so I was hoping, it wouldn't put her off or anything. She seemed to be fine with it, but, it's just one of those things that happens, like, not the greatest time for this type of thing to pop up. Because I don't remember it. It's been ages since I've seen the original, and I don't remember that happening in the original.
I may be wrong, and if I'm wrong, you can just erase what I'm about to say. I'm about 99% sure that did not happen in the original.
Anyways, yeah, it's not like a scene that I don't feel like that part of the movie would have made a difference in terms of my enjoyment, but whatever.
Yeah, and I guess I do want to mention one more quick thing, but Nicole, the woman who has the dog, and she's also the one who takes the truck to try to. It looks like she's trying to go save the dog. It's not really clear, but she's at that point, she's not really mentally out there. One, she's the same woman who appeared in Wrong Turn for a bit, but two, that choice right there just drives me crazy. Just, hey, while all these people are up here on the roof, I'll just go take the truck. And first of all, the zombies weren't touching the dog, for one. And it just, like, I feel bad for her character because she also lost her father early in the movie, which is probably one of the more emotional scenes. But boy, talk about a really bad character choice, and it might be one of the top 3 worst character choices in the movie.
Yeah, there's a couple of poor choices in the movie, but that guy who accidentally chainsaws the other woman. Ugh.
I I sort of feel bad for that guy too, because if I recall, that was the
Well, I think I feel a little more bad for the woman, but okay.
well, sure, but I think I may be wrong, but I think the woman he gets is a woman I didn't much care for, so I might not be as big a problem with that.
Okay. See, Jiggy's got his priorities straight.
You know I do. No, I guess one last thing. I feel like there were some characters, even in the version I saw, a bit longer version, some characters that didn't really get that much either development or that much to do. They're just in the background at some points, and we know their names, but that's pretty much all we know about them. One of them being this girl named Monica, who she appears to be in a intimate relationship with Steve, but aside from that, she doesn't really do anything in the movie. And there's some
I
other.
don't know if I'd call it a relationship, more of just a fuck buddy.
hey, you take what you can get in a post-zombie apocalypse. And even some of the more interesting characters like Norma, she was I believe, the truck driver, or Take, who was the I don't even know how to describe him, the sort of gas station attendant looking guy. And he was pretty good toward the end, but I just wish we knew a little more about some of those characters. But I know that when you have a cast of like something like 13, 11 characters, it can be difficult to give everybody some time. I think aside from that, though, I can't think of anything else to mention.
I did enjoy the moment where CJ and that other guard had to put up with the one guy's story about how he knew he was gay.
When I was 13, he had the bluest eyes. It's like, oh god, dude, stop. It's actually funny because I was watching this movie with a friend of mine through a Skype type service. So we were watching it and talking at the same time. And my friend happens to be gay, so I was telling him that if he ever gets into a situation like that, he should do the same type of thing. Just torture people with stories about his coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking an 8.5 out of 10. And I'm going to be maybe uncharacteristically generous and throw this one a 9 out of 10. It's not my favorite zombie movie, but I do think it's a really good zombie movie. And it's definitely, I mean, I think most people think that too, because, like you said, this has, like a 7.3 on IMDb, which is insanely high for a horror movie. I mean, and it's a really popular movie too, so most people have seen this. So it's definitely a movie that's worth watching. And of course, I'd always recommend when you do watch it, just try to watch the longer version if possible. I'm honestly not sure which scenes weren't in the shorter version, because it's been so long since I've seen it. But it's still a movie that you might as well take the longest version you can get. It's a pretty enjoyable ride, even if the ending is a little bit downbeat. It's still a decent amount of fun. So I feel like a 9 out of 10 is pretty fair.
Yeah, I mean, as I was watching it, I was throwing up between an 8 and a 9 also. Like I was saying earlier, it is definitely one of my more favorite zombie movies. Not that I have a lot of favorite zombie movies, but it's definitely high up on my list. I think I settle on an 8, but that, it's still a really entertaining movie. I think just one thing about it is that there becomes a certain point in the movie where they're in the mall, and I'm just like, okay, I've had enough of the mall. Let's go somewhere, do something. And eventually they do. I think around the time the whole baby thing that happened, I was kind of like, it just feels like, okay, they're in the mall and shit just keeps happening. I mean, let's get things moving. And so eventually they do, and it's all good. So overall, yeah, entertaining movie. There's plenty of characters in there to care about, or to at least entertain you in one way or another. These zombie action's good. I actually prefer the faster moving zombies than the slow ones. I just think slow ones kind of ridiculous. I mean, unless you get put in a really bad spot, there's no way they can catch you. But in this one, it's a bit of a different scenario when they run just as fast as you can run. So, I just find that more terrifying, at least in terms of if you're trying to make a more realistic horror movie. So give it a watch if you haven't already.